Hey friends, this is Skeptics and Scoundrels. Before we begin, I just have to say thank you to all of my new subscribers. This channel is a mere 2 weeks old. We started at nothing, and as I'm filming this, we just hit 1,300 subscribers. I'm overwhelmed and humbled by all of the positive response and comments that I've seen. I've also been very entertained and challenged by some of the more respectful challenges to what the position was in the last video. Overall, it was a great experience. Thank you so much. Thanks again to Godless Engineer for plugging my video, which I think is what got the YouTube algorithm moving. And it just kind of snowballed, and now it is where it's at right now. And I'm just so happy. Thank you. So this is the first video of a new series of videos that I've been thinking of for a while. I'm calling this series Things I Wish I Knew When I Deconverted, or TWICWID for short. Yeah, I'm still working on that. It's my goal that the topics I talk about in this series will be helpful for those considering leaving their religion, currently in the process of leaving, or those who have already left but find themselves looking back wondering why things turned out the way they did, much like I did when I left my religion. And hey, even if you aren't thinking of leaving your religion, the information here should at least help you view those who are with more understanding, compassion, and respect. And the point of this is that at whatever stage you find yourself in the process, you'll hopefully discover some new ideas or tools which may help you not only leave religion, but understand why you're leaving religion. And more importantly, this protects you from the next religion-like ensnarement that might cross your path. Why do I consider that important? Well, my background is that of a Jehovah's Witness, which is a Christian religion that is notoriously difficult to leave. Not because what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach is true or anything, but because the cost of leaving is so damned high. I'll get more into those details here in a moment. And this is all stuff I learned after I left and would have been helpful for me to know while I was leaving. Now, some may look at leaving a religion and say, what's the big deal? Just leave and don't think about it. Get on with your life. Move on. Be happy. Why are you still talking about this? And while this may be satisfactory to some, it's not for me. Primarily because leaving the religion on its own isn't enough to protect you from the next thing that comes along, attempting to convince you into giving up your time, devotion, energy, money. In life, these are limited and precious resources, and the last thing we need is some robed or suited charlatan attempting to take it from us. And I'm of the strong opinion that it's better to understand why you leave your religion in order to protect future you's interests. And since you'll be future you someday, you should really act in that person's best interests. So I'm motivated to start this series because of the way I left my religion. Leaving the Christian cult of Jehovah's Witnesses 14 years ago was one of the most challenging and ultimately rewarding things I have ever done in my life. Once I realized I no longer believed, I was excited at the prospect of learning what the real world was like, what science was really about, what our great thinkers had to say, and what potential futures lay before me. This included undoing a lifetime of conditioning, indoctrination, layer upon layer of lies and half-truths, and the faulty reasoning the witnesses had poisoned my mind with over the course of my life. And the difficulties in dropping the witness teachings was exacerbated by the fact that since my entire upbringing was centered around said teachings, I was woefully ill-equipped for the task of leaving. Jehovah's Witness teachings, in conjunction with them telling you not to go to college, not to get a higher education, not study philosophy, not go to websites or news sources that they don't approve of, and above all, not question. They prevent you from acquiring these tools needed to leave their religion by design. And from what I've seen and heard over the years, the witnesses are not the only ones to do this. To put it more succinctly, I came to realize that I was given a very limited and very flawed tool set in figuring out how the world worked, and virtually no formalized method useful in making sense of a world or determining truth from fiction. But at the time, that was all I had and all I had to work with. It wasn't until 2 years after I left the Jehovah's Witnesses that I decided to go to university, get a degree, and then eventually started learning counter-apologetics from resources like YouTube and various books. And I'm really glad I went through this process because it helped me appreciate that there was so much more to the world and so much more I didn't know. I had a lot of learning to do, and I still do. In fact, to borrow some terms from Donald Rumsfeld, when leaving your religion, you have two categories of things you don't know. First is the set of things of which you are aware of its existence, but you lack understanding or knowledge of the subjects. We call these known unknowns. A common example of a known unknown is, say, the theory of evolution. Many of those departing religion know of the existence of the term the theory of evolution, or just evolution. And many have a general understanding of the concept behind the word and what the word describes. And if you're lucky, the teachings of your religion hasn't twisted it into something that it's really not. But ultimately, you know the existence of the concept. So now you're easily able to say to yourself, hey, I know this exists, but I don't know much about it. I should go learn more. Those are known unknowns. But on the other side is a much more difficult list of unknowns. These are your unknown unknowns. And this is the set of concepts and ideas that currently you have no idea even exist. For example, here's a short list of the unknown unknowns I had to eventually discover after I left my religion. Had these items not been in my unknown unknown list, and rather in my known unknown list, my recovery from Christianity would have gone a lot faster and a whole lot more smoothly. And so it's the purpose of this series to help some discover items that are in their unknown unknown lists and get them at least moved over into their known unknown lists. Because once it's over there, now you can pick it up and go learn it. And while talking about these subjects, we'll go into general overview of what they are and what they mean and how they're important, just to get you started. And then when you're interested in learning more about one of these, you can then check out the references in the description below, or just go out and study on your own. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the actual topic of this particular episode, deconversion and deconstruction. So we're going to look at these two terms, their definitions, and how they apply to someone leaving their religion. Let's start with deconversion. A general high-level definition of deconversion is to reject a particular religion, faith, or belief. Deconverting can be something as simple as saying, I don't believe anymore, and then walking away from the religion. Or it could involve a great deal of internal struggle, anguish, and uncertainty as you contend with the implications and potential fallout of leaving your faith. As a result, deconversion can be very simple and painless for some, and for others be a very drawn-out struggle with sacrifices and contention along the way. And when your religion is more cult-like the Jehovah's Witnesses, it can be quite difficult to deconvert, involving a massive amount of sacrifice in the form of familial relationships, lifelong friends, your home, your job, your entire social net. For some, this difficulty is so great, it leads to depression, and in some extreme cases, suicide. And in many cases, some choose to remain in the religion and pretend to believe, so as not to lose the things they love. And this can be torture to some, as attested to by many of the threads on the ex-jeohva subreddit. And a handful of other religions, like the more extreme and fundamental forms of Islam, threaten life and limb if someone dares to leave. Real and actual death. So understandably, this can be a struggle for many, and for some, it might not even be an option, no matter how much they want it. But on its own, deconversion is the most basic and common way that people leave religions. Being basic and common doesn't mean it's invalid, though. It just means it's a simpler process when compared to something like deconstruction. And if you're someone who simply deconverted, please don't take this as a statement that you didn't do enough. Everyone's situation and needs are different, and if it worked for you, then it worked for you, and that's great. And ultimately with deconversion, you'll learn a few things in leaving, make some observations, reach some conclusions, but relative to deconstruction, it's not a very deep and thorough examination of the faith and its components before putting it all behind you. And a small tangent here, a slightly different term, but fairly synonymous to deconversion, is reversion. Some people object to the term deconversion as they reason they never actually converted into their religion. There are many people who are born-ins, myself included, that never had the opportunity to make an honest and pressure-free assessment of the religion and then go on to freely decide to join it. And in cases like this, some people like the term reversion because they are reverting back to their former non-religious, non-believing state as they were when they were infants or children. And I find this totally valid. I'm not in the business of telling people what their definition should be or what labels they can or cannot assign to themselves. And there are nuances here that the word reversion does address. Okay, the next term we're going to look at is deconstruction. This is a more complicated concept, as deconstruction may or may not lead to deconversion. The definition of deconstruction is to analyze something, typically in order to expose its hidden internal assumptions and contradictions and subvert its apparent significance or unity, or reduce something to its constituent parts in order to reinterpret it. Deconstruction of a religious belief is a much more complicated process when compared to deconversion, as it requires a much longer process of dismantling your belief system down to its fundamental components and then analyzing them to see if they really work together or not. And for many, this is a very rewarding process. So when we're talking about reducing the belief down to its very basic components, here are the questions we're asking. What are the core assumptions and tenets of my religion? Why are they considered to be true? What evidence supports these claims? Are there contradicting facts in your pool of core assumptions and tenets? Are there any potential refutations for these claims? Because if a core tenet is falsified, then anything built upon it from before and anything you might attempt to build on it after is either falsified itself or at least thrown into serious question. And once you're done analyzing the core assumptions of the religion, you can then move on to building more complicated ideas off of them and then scrutinizing those. You want to ask yourself things like, what is the reasoning and logic used to build these more complex ideas? Is there any flawed reasoning at play here? Are there fallacies creeping into my logic anywhere? And then once you draw some conclusions, you can then ask yourself, do they support one another? Are they consistent with one another? And finally, once you're done rebuilding the belief, you can then sit back and ask yourself, are the conclusions drawn from this analysis compatible with how we understand reality, with how reality presents itself? Are these conclusions compatible with my sense of morality? What did I leave on the cutting room floor? Why did I leave it there? As I mentioned before, for questioning Jehovah's Witnesses, deconstruction is a very difficult thing to do, since the toolkit that many born-in JWs have is specifically designed to not do this. The Jehovah's Witness religion focuses on obedience to its authority figures in the organization. There's no critical thinking, though they claim to practice it. And above all, an overarching unity of beliefs between all congregations in the organization must be maintained. In a system like this, there is no room for a public deconstruction, since a thoughtful breakdown and analysis of the religious belief may put you in conflict with the unified dictates of the organization. And even if you were to privately deconstruct successfully and rebuild the religion into something different, there is no tolerance for talking about it. That new faith would not be in complete alignment with the current version being pushed by the Jehovah's Witness leadership. And if you go against them, you'll quickly find yourself shunned and lose your social circle. But I would say usually, deconstruction leads one to abandon the religion altogether. There are cases where the one practicing deconstruction may internally reconcile the issues that caused the process to start, and the person reconstructs a new form of the religious faith from at least some or all of the dismantled pieces. And that's fine too. So lastly, let's talk about how these two are related. The first thing we should realize after looking at these definitions is that deconstruction and deconversion are not mutually exclusive. You can just deconvert. You can deconvert and then go back later to deconstruct. You can deconstruct first and then deconvert due to your findings. Or you can deconstruct and then rebuild your faith into something that you end up keeping. There's no wrong way to do this, as long as you approach the matter honestly and with the primary goal of seeking truth in mind. So in conclusion, no two departures from religion are the same. So no matter what path you choose, your mileage will vary. One person's deconversion should not be measured against another person's deconversion in any sort of competitive sense. And the same goes for deconstruction. No two are alike, nor should they be. Basically, there's no right way to leave a religion. If you find yourself no longer believing, then you find yourself no longer believing, and that's fine. The important thing is, when examining whether you want to leave your religion or how you leave your religion, you should be as equipped as possible for the journey ahead. And I hope this helps. So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this content. I figure I'll interweave additional episodes of Twikwid in with some of my other more random videos over the coming months. Once I have a couple more of these completed, I'll create a playlist to track them all. And if you can think of any topics that would be a good fit for this series, let me know in the comments below. Or just drop general feedback as well. And if you'd like to promote the growth of this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. And thank you again to my new subscribers. Thank you for watching. See ya.